The day my son humiliated me began on a chilly Tuesday morning. I arrived at the real estate office a little early, wearing my favorite coat, the one I had bought decades ago when I first moved into the apartment. It smelled faintly of lavender and home. The office had glass walls, polished oak tables, and chairs that made small squeaks when you sat down. The room felt too sterile, too sharp, compared to the warmth of the apartment I had raised my son in. I had called the meeting because I wanted him involved in the decision. I thought family mattered in moments like these. After all, it wasn't just a property, it was my life's work. I took a seat across from the real estate agent, trying to hide the nervous flutter in my stomach. He began explaining the market value of the apartment, going through charts, comparables, and potential buyers. My son had been restless even before the meeting began, tapping his foot and checking his phone. I started to speak, to remind him that I needed time, that this apartment was more than money. Before I could get a word out, he slammed his palm on the table, the sound echoing sharply in the room. "Shut up when the adults are talking," he shouted, glaring at me. The air froze. The real estate agent stopped mid-sentence, eyes darting between us. I felt a rush of heat to my face, a cold mix of shock, embarrassment, and disbelief. All I wanted was a conversation, a respectful discussion about the home I had poured my soul into, and instead, I was being scolded like a child. He was my son, the boy I had raised, the child I had comforted, fed, and protected, yet in this room, he had become a stranger. His voice carried authority, arrogance, and a confidence I had never seen in him before. He didn't just speak, he commanded. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I wanted to shrink, to disappear, but something inside me refused. I straightened in my chair and met his gaze. The first time in years I had truly felt like I was looking at a man who had grown without guidance. The agent cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to resume the conversation, but it was too late. The room had shifted. I realized that the apartment wasn't just under discussion. It had become a battleground for control, for power, and for the remnants of respect that should have existed between a mother and her child. I stayed quiet, letting him speak, watching him, trying to remember the little boy who once clung to my hand on our first day in that apartment. He was gone, replaced by someone who saw life only in terms of opportunity and profit. My heart ached, but I refused to show it. I would not let him see how deeply his words cut. I understood that this confrontation was inevitable. After all, money and inheritance had a way of revealing the true nature of people. The apartment, once my sanctuary, was now a symbol of tension, of love turned sour in the face of ambition. When the meeting ended, the room silent and heavy, I walked out slowly, my mind replaying the scene over and over. I had always believed that family meant loyalty, respect, and understanding. Today, I had been proven wrong. My son had shouted at me in public, disregarding every memory, every sacrifice, every tear shed within those walls. As I stepped into the crisp air outside, I promised myself one thing: no matter what happened next, I would protect my home, my memories, and the dignity that he had tried to strip away. This was only the beginning, but I was determined not to be silenced again. For weeks, the tension between us simmered like a pot left on low heat. My son had been insistent about selling the apartment, saying it was too big, too old, and too expensive to maintain. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the same idea: sell now, make money, secure your future. He used statistics, market trends, and promises of perfect timing to pressure me. But beneath his arguments, I sensed the real motive: greed. He wasn't thinking about me, my memories, or my comfort. He was thinking about profit and expansion for his business. He called almost every day, leaving messages filled with urgency and subtle guilt. "Mom, you're making a mistake," he said. "You're holding on to the past when the future is waiting." I tried to reason with him, explaining that my attachment was not irrational. The apartment was where I had raised him, where we had celebrated birthdays, mourned losses, and built a life together. The memories were intertwined with every wall, every corner. But he waved aside my words, confident that he knew better. He didn't understand that selling the apartment wasn't just a transaction, it was a betrayal. Each time he spoke, I felt the weight of decades pressing down on me. I remembered how I had worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, and postponed surgeries to keep the place. I remembered the nights I stayed up comforting him when he had nightmares. I remembered the warmth of the kitchen, the squeak of the stairs, and the small victories that made this house a home. And now he wanted to erase all of that. I realized that this wasn't just about a building, it was about my autonomy, my memories, and my right to decide what happens to my life. The more he pushed, the more I clung to what was mine. Every call, every message, every visit reminded me that I was fighting not just for an apartment, but for my voice. He was convinced he was right, and I was convinced he was wrong. The apartment became a silent battleground, its walls holding witness to a clash that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with respect. The apartment had been my sanctuary for over 30 years. It wasn't merely bricks and mortar, it was the vessel of my life story. Every room held a memory. The kitchen where I spent countless hours cooking meals while he did his homework at the table, the living room where we celebrated birthdays with friends and neighbors, the balcony where we watched the city lights and talked about dreams. I remembered the first time I moved in after my husband passed away, how lonely the rooms felt until he ran through them with laughter, filling the spaces with warmth. Those walls had seen joy, sorrow, hope, and despair. And now, my son was treating it like a commodity, a ticket to financial gain. He interrupted my words during the meeting, dismissing the years of sacrifice that had built this life. "Mom, you don't understand business," he said sharply. His words stung because they were true, not about the apartment's value, but about his understanding of my life. I did understand, perfectly. I understood that selling it would mean erasing our history, our connection, and my identity. When I tried to explain my perspective, his gaze hardened, as if my voice were an obstacle. It was clear that he was no longer the child I had nurtured, but a man blinded by ambition. I left the meeting with a quiet determination. No matter how persuasive he became, no matter how loud or insistent, this apartment would remain mine. It was more than real estate, it was a part of me. After the meeting, my son followed me to the parking lot, his steps quick and deliberate. "You embarrass me," he said, his voice trembling with anger and frustration. I paused, gripping my car door, and whispered, "I embarrassed you?" He explained that he had already spoken to an investor and promised them that we'd accept their offer. Apparently, he believed it was necessary to secure his future business expansion. He had taken it upon himself to make decisions without my consent, assuming that I would comply. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. My son had crossed a line that couldn't be undone with apologies. He assumed control over my life and my property, disregarding the years of trust, love, and guidance I had given him. I realized that this conflict wasn't just about the apartment, it was about respect, authority, and boundaries. As he walked away, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. I would not allow him to dictate the terms of my life. I would find a way to protect what was mine, even if it meant standing alone. That night, I wandered through the apartment, each room whispering memories. The kitchen counters still had the faint scratches from when he attempted pancakes as a child. The walls bore traces of pencil marks documenting his height over the years. The balcony railing felt smooth beneath my fingers, worn by countless evenings where I had comforted him through heartbreak and disappointment. Selling this apartment would mean selling my life, my history, my connection to him, and the man he had become. It was not merely property. It was a repository of love, struggle, and resilience. How could I put a price on that? How could anyone quantify the countless nights spent awake, worrying, working, and building a home? Each memory reminded me why I could not let it go. I realized that the apartment wasn't for sale, not to investors, not to my son, not to the world. It was mine. My connection to it, and to the life it represented, could not be bought or transferred. I made a silent vow to protect it, no matter what battles lay ahead. The next morning, my son arrived with papers, his expression a mix of urgency and expectation. "All you need to do is sign," he said, placing the contract on the dining table. I read each line carefully. Hidden within the fine print was a clause granting him temporary financial authority to manage the transaction, a clause he had inserted without my knowledge. The audacity of assuming control left me silent. "I'm not signing," I said calmly. His face flushed and his jaw tightened. He tried to argue, but I remained steadfast. The apartment would not be sold under coercion or manipulation. It was mine to keep, and he could not override that. The sense of powerlessness he thought he had was an illusion. I was in control. The legal documents could not change the memories, the history, or the bond that the apartment represented. I had the final word. His tone shifted as frustration replaced reason. "You're being selfish," he accused. "You're ruining my future." Each word landed like a blow, but I refused to absorb it. Was it selfish to hold onto what was mine? Was it selfish to value memories over money? His ambition blinded him to the truth. Respect and love are worth far more than profit. I saw in him a man consumed by desire, forgetting the foundation built by those who loved him most. I remained calm, knowing that time and reflection might teach him the lessons he was too blind to see now. A week later, he arranged another meeting with the investor, without telling me. The room was filled with charts, graphs, and projections, but I was not a participant. When I attempted to speak, he silenced me with a curt, "Mom, please. Just stop talking." That moment crystallized everything. I realized that I was no longer a child to be managed, nor a passive participant in my own life. I had a voice, and it would not be silenced. The apartment would remain mine, and so would my dignity. I would assert my autonomy, even in the face of his arrogance. I visited a lawyer the next day. The apartment was entirely mine, legally, morally, and emotionally. I updated my will, ensuring that if anything happened to me, it would be donated to a housing foundation for single mothers, rather than being sold or inherited. When my son found out, he was furious. "You'd give it to strangers?" he asked incredulously. I looked at him calmly. "They respect me," I replied. He had no answer. The apartment would remain untouchable, a testament to my resolve. Months later, my son returned. No papers. No shouting. Just a quiet apology. "I'm sorry," he said. "I forgot it was your home, not my opportunity." I let the silence stretch. "You don't speak to your mother like that," I said softly. "Not in private. Not in meetings. Not ever." He nodded, and in that moment, I realized I had reclaimed something far more valuable than property: my voice, my respect, and my dignity.